Hi, welcome to the Bold, Brutally Honest podcast where we unpack the real stories, smart strategies, and unfiltered truths shaping the future of work. I'm your host, Kate Ball, author of the Culture Chronicles, founder of Sparkle and Sass Consulting, and the person companies call when they're done playing nice and finally ready to fix their people strategy. Today, we're flipping the script on traditional HR leadership because, let's be honest, too many companies still cling to the myth that HR people need to be full-time to be high impact. But what if the future of leadership is leaner, sharper, and deeply intentional? So this is where Sarah Alaimo comes in. Not only is she an old friend and colleague of mine, but she's also a fractional HR executive, a startup whisperer, and a culture shaper. She's the kind of leader who builds trust without the politics. She drives results without the burnout. And she knows exactly how to grow a company without losing its soul. So in this episode, we're digging into what it really means to lead with empathy, set bold boundaries, and deliver big outcomes without needing a 9-to-5 badge to prove your worth. Fractional doesn't mean part-time effort. It means full force impact, but intentionally. So let's dig into it. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Kate. Thank you so much for having me on. Wow, that introduction. I don't know if I can live up to that, but fingers crossed. I really appreciate you having me here today. And I'm really excited to talk about all things HR, which I know a lot of people could, roll their eyes at that. Like doesn't sound fun. I think we're still working out that stigma of Toby from The Office. I am not Toby. I am literally an anti-Toby, the opposite.
You're so glamorous for a start.
Oh, well, thank you. And you know what? HR can be glamorous. We're not the ones who just put on the birthday parties or are the ones who just come and, fun police. We get to build culture. We get to build relationships. We get to help be a part of building a company through strategy. And like you were talking about, the culture, that is the biggest part of bringing amazing people in and keeping them. So, everyone said, or not everyone, I've heard people say, HR is just there to protect the company. I don't see it that way. I see myself as protecting both because I've been in both seats where I needed to protect an employee or I needed to protect an organization. And, over the last 20 years, I've seen a lot of some great stories, lots of things I probably shouldn't talk about. We don't really have HIPAA guidelines, but we have our HR Hippocratic oath. And I that's why I do what I do, is because I've been in a lot of different seats. I've seen a lot of good. I've seen a lot of bad. And I'm so passionate about the opportunities for people to be in a great company, for companies to be great. And there's no reason every company can't be. I don't know if I should jump right into the fractional part of things. But...
Well, let's talk about your company, because obviously anyone who wants to look at LinkedIn can see where you've been and what you've done. But I know that you've recently launched your own business. And before we dive into the fractional side of things, let's talk about what that is and what's led you to this point.
Yes, that's a really great question. I think I always knew that I would want to work for myself. I grew up in a family business. My parents own a shoe company. So I saw them running making their own schedules and running their own lives and building this world the way that they wanted to live. And, my entire life I was told, we go to college, we get a job, we, get a house with a white picket fence, we get married, and then everything's all set. Well, the real world doesn't really operate that way. How are we to know when we're 18 what we want to do for the rest of our lives? Thankfully, when I graduated from college, there was an amazing recruiter who saw my resume and said, "You're a recruiter." I never would have thought of that. I didn't really know what HR was. I got a business degree and communication and thought I wanted to be in HR, but I don't think I really knew what it was. And having been in the event space for years, this recruiter said, if you can handle a $100,000 wedding, you can handle a few job wrecks. And so for 17 years, I worked in the talent acquisition space, which is where I really got the opportunity to see all parts of HR for really big companies, for small organizations, a lot within healthcare. So I'm really passionate about compliance, dotting I's, crossing T's, the super sexy side of HR. Really not. But that's the part I'm really passionate about, keeping companies out of litigation. Unfortunately, I've spent a lot of time with attorneys over the last 3 years. I almost want to sit for the bar exam and see what I've picked up over this time. But that's what I'm passionate about within HR. And that's why I wanted to work for myself, to get ahead of some pitfalls that small and medium-sized companies can easily fall into without knowing. And it just kind of fell into my lap. I was working for a smaller organization where they thought they only needed me part-time, which was perfect. I had just had my son, who's 3 now. And another organization said, hey, we want someone like you. Do you know anyone who would work part-time for us? And they said, we really want you. Do you think you could? And so I took them on. So all of a sudden, I'm a fractional HR leader before that was even a term we were all throwing around. And then when the organization that I had first started working with decided to part ways with everyone, quite illegally, I will say, where I got to learn a lot more, then that just gave me the opportunity to just start my own thing. And luckily, I already had that one client and got to start telling the story of what I could do for organizations, and really starting to talk about the fact that smaller to medium-sized companies don't need someone full-time.
Okay, so fractional basically means exactly as it sounds. You're giving them a part of yourself or a part of your time. What traditionally, when somebody turns full-time or part-time, for example, and then fractional, how much time per week or per month would you say you're spending with companies?
Currently working on a monthly retainer basis, so that I'm going to have certain days that I allocate to one company and certain days that I allocate to others. There are a few where I will do small, hourly projects, but I like to be able to be as entrenched in the business as possible. So a couple of days a week is ideal.
Okay, so it's really kind of structured from the outset in terms of from both sides' expectations. What about if they need ad hoc support? Because let's face it, we've all been in scenarios where, I hate to say it, but the proverbial shit hits the fan.
Exactly. I have a network of other amazing fractionals that I can reach out to, but I do have an HR associate, someone who is very passionate about HR, wanted to learn about just the business in general of HR, and so works for me on a super part-time basis. So kind of a mentorship opportunity, but I get so much out of having that support, and then being able to help me out when a client needs a little bit more than I have time for at that moment.
I assume as well, not everything is worthy of your time. Some of the things you're like, you don't need somebody of my caliber to do this, for example.
What's important to me, especially in a fractional capacity, is a lot of small businesses, while they don't need someone full-time, they also can't afford a full-time person. And I don't think that should be a barrier to not having human resources in place. I understand that a lot of businesses look at human resources and see that it's not a revenue generating position. I mean, it really, maybe not generating, but strategy, people, time loss, money loss. There is a lot that HR brings to the table. And yes, so I do often use my HR associate when it's something that I don't need to bill at my typical hours. And it's a really great opportunity for that person to learn.
Absolutely. So obviously, you've gone from that full-time leadership to working fractionally with a number of clients. Where do you see the biggest difference in terms of impact?
Oh my goodness, impact. I feel like I now have the opportunity to bring impact more quickly, and that honestly, I feel like the impact that I want to impart is taken more seriously. I think it's coming in this capacity, maybe there's a different level of respect or a different level of understanding of the need for human resources. A lot of times I do, unfortunately, join a team when something big has happened and we need to, backpedal, sometimes bring in legal, those sorts of things. So, and I don't know, it also could be now that I'm going on 20 years of experience in this area. I have a lot of experience and stories to share. And, I can say in the past, I have done this and this worked, or, yeah, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
That's right. Don't worry. Not a problem. And so obviously I own a consulting business and have also done the in-house full-time work. And one of the biggest differences that I see is that I'm much more strategic. When I was in-house, it was more about the execution almost. Yes, there was the strategy involved, but oftentimes there would be multiple people involved in that process. So you would collaboratively identify the strategy, and then it would be down to you to execute and to actually kind of implement and roll out and make sure it's working and test it and all of those things and optimize. Whereas as a consultant, most of the clients that I've been working with, at least so far, they've brought me in for the higher level. They've brought me in to give them the answers, find the solutions, fix the problems, build the strategy. Oftentimes, and maybe it's the size of companies I'm working with are slightly larger, I suppose, but oftentimes they have people in situ that can execute once they know what to do. What they needing me for is to help them identify the right path first and break it down into the step-by-steps and help them build that project map and timeline and things. So that's what I'm seeing. And I wouldn't necessarily term what I'm doing fractional, because I tend to dip in and out. I'll come for a project and then that's done. And maybe they've got another project for me to work on, but I'm not there for the broader sense. So in terms of companies and things like that, what do you think is often misunderstood about fractional HR leadership? What are you encountering as this is somewhat an emerging space? So are there kind of misconceptions you're having to correct, or are you having to educate people?
Yes, I think just the word fractional is kind of a new one that we've been throwing out over, I mean, maybe not even the last year, maybe just that long. And so people are like, okay, so you're only going to, give me half of yourself, well, or half of your experience, or half work. No, it's 100%. And it's efficient and it's what you guys need. I think really what, I wouldn't say this as I'm, talking to a potential new client, but I think we're really just eliminating the waste, the time that I definitely see massive value in being in an office. I love building relationships. I love that time with people. But how much time do we spend in the office just kind of chit-chatting and maybe wasting some time at the water cooler? And, as companies are bringing people back, I do think that there is a large waste of time by people coming back into the office. I feel like we're all able to be a lot more efficient when we are remote, or if I know that I have one day in an office, I'm going to maximize that 100%. And I think others see that and feel that as well. And we can get something done. It's not going to be, well, let's just have another meeting about it tomorrow. I'm not pro meeting. Let's have a meeting. Let's get to the point. Let's move on.
I hate meetings. No, I think we've all been in situations where you have a meeting to discuss having another meeting and you're just sitting there like, what is going on right now? Why?
I've seen this when I've come into companies. I'm given a company email address because I am part of the company. And I see the calendar and I say, we don't have any room to get anything done. We don't have any time on the calendar to do our work. And that's what we hire people for. That's what people stay for. That's what people are challenged by, getting to do their work.
Yep. No, so true. And the other thing, let's talk about culture, because so many companies say it's a priority, but so few put in the work for it. So when you're stepping in as a fractional leader, obviously you've not helped build that culture and you're not there every day. So what does real culture work look like for you?
It is spending time with leadership and really defining it and coaching where I need to, just to ensure that that's what they are giving off, that they're living the culture, that they are, it's in words, it's in our actions each day. If we're talking about being an inclusive culture, is that person actually acting in that capacity? I think a lot of it is just, what the leadership is emanating out and how others are then catching on. If that's the reality, that's what we need to see. My father is from Missouri and he always just said, we're the show me state, just show me. Let's not talk about it. Let's just do it.
Yeah, very, very much the same. But obviously it's inevitable when you're working with multiple different companies and clients that you've got different personalities, different wants, different needs. So how do you kind of build trust and kind of engender that trusting relationship as a critical foundation, building that emotional safety when you're not in the building with these people every day and when they may have a different preferred way of working to yourself?
I do like to, even though a minute ago I just said, let's not have meetings, I do like to meet with the key individuals within a company. And if I'm working with a small one, I can meet with everyone to really find out, what do you love? What do you think is lacking? How do you want to grow? How do you think that, like, asking all the questions. I guess the recruiter will never leave me. I just want to interview everybody. I think that asking the questions that maybe no one's ever asked them before kind of establishes the trust, and then taking what I learned from them and actually doing something with it so that they can hear and see that I'm doing it. It's just, I mean, that's just usually how I build the trust. If we need to continue conversations, or, I'm open to it. I'm not the expert on everything. And I know that. And I want to learn from people. I have experience to bring. I have certifications that I've learned things from. But like you said, every company is different. So I'm open and I want to keep conversation going.
And I've not worked in a fractional way, so I'm making assumptions, and please correct me if I'm wrong. But I would imagine that you have to be really good at setting boundaries, because I know just from the work that I do, there's always something that we call scope creep. People come to you and they have one need, one vision. But then as you start to do the work, it evolves into something else and something else. And that time that was initially mapped out to be 2 weeks becomes 3, becomes 4. So talk to me about what boundaries have been game changers for you and how you enforce them and teach clients to respect them.
Wow. That's a really great question. And I think it's just something that over my career, I've learned I have to set the boundaries and I have to be strict with them. I definitely earlier in my life would respond to every email the second I got it, whether it was a Saturday, a Sunday at midnight. I mean, I was all over that, answering calls, texts, things like that. And so what I've had to do is, okay, I have Mondays for this team. That's when I'm handling everything. They know I'll be back on Wednesday, those sorts of examples. So it is really sticking to that. And obviously, if, there is a fire, or as you said, hits the fan, I'm there, obviously. But I have to be strict on my schedule and timing. And then as far as, projects and whatnot, just setting the expectations ahead of time that this is when, you're getting this done, and being on top of it. I do think when we are there in a fractional capacity that, at least in my experience so far, some boundaries haven't been pushed in the same way because I'm not there every single day. And I think our time is maybe not taken for granted in the same way.
I don't know. I think I get the opposite. I get hey, do you have 10 minutes for a quick call? And first of all, it's never just 10 minutes. We all know this. You spend 10 minutes just making pleasantries before you get into the actual depth of what they needed you for. But also that call usually leads on to emails and things. So finding a way to actually manage the expectation whilst at the same time, they're your client, they're your customer. So you want to satisfy, you want to please. You don't want to say no because that could cost you the business. So have you found, I don't know, certain phrasing that works for you, or ways to politely push back when those requests do come through that could detract from other commitments?
Really, I don't think I have any genius solution here. I think it's just asking, can I speak with you at this time tomorrow? Ever since having a little one, I think that I've guarded my time just a little bit better in the evenings. And, sometimes I'll say, I'm putting a kid in a bath right now. Can we talk tomorrow? Like, that's not going to be an environment that they want to talk to me in, those sorts of things. And when I have taken calls in those capacities, I have spoken with people who were very frustrated, but I'm not open about who I am. I'm a mom. I'm an author. I'm a person in recovery. I'm a wife. I'm a dog mom. I'm all of these things. And while I'm at work, I am focused as the HR leader. But if I'm not within those hours, I'm all those other things.
How do you think your lived experience, and you just mentioned the recovery, which I was going to bring up next anyway. We've already talked about the motherhood aspect as well, but how do you think all of those factors, your lived experience, influences your own leadership style and how you show up for your clients?
I have had some really amazing opportunities over the last maybe 8 years or so to work within HR departments that had the struggle of what do we do with this individual that needs help? This person is drunk on the job. This person, probably even more than 8 years ago, working in the hospitals. Hey, can you walk this person off? They're deferring drugs from patients. What? I have a very different outlook on this now that I am nearly 10 years sober. I'm very active within the 12-step community. I've been out, even on LinkedIn. I was never going to talk about my recovery. That was, a shameful thing in my mind. But I would say that the stigma and whatnot has very much been lifted since the pandemic. And it's just something that I actually use as a strength. It's something I use as a way to build trust when I'm needing to talk to an employee that might be at their, the worst day. It might be their bottom. And I now am really strong with a lot of different resources to offer. I was a part of Recovery Friendly Workplace with a number of insurance organizations, something we've rolled out to large companies. I think that that's something that that may have been an area where you met my husband when you guys used to work for the big company. I think it's just really, now that I'm very open about it, I think that it helps to humanize HR. And I've learned a lot. I mean, the 12 steps, I think everyone could do some step work. And it's something that I definitely bring to my professional life. I think it's definitely changed how I communicate. It's changed how I understand people. I think it's changed how I show up. So all positives over here.
Love that. And obviously, you've seen behind the curtain with a lot of companies, as have I. But what is one red flag that tells you a company isn't ready for real people strategy work just yet?
I think it's when I get the side conversation from leadership, saying the opposite maybe of what we're actually trying to put out there. Or, can you go tell this person? I'm not just the mouthpiece for leadership. I need to act within the law. I need to act within the employee handbook. I definitely have been put in that place where I've been asked to, schmooze someone or zhuzh up a message. And I'm just not willing to do that.
Yeah, I remember. So like yourself, I started in talent acquisition. I worked recruiting agencies I've got a client who's constantly trying to call me right now. I worked in agencies for 10 years prior to moving in-house. And I had so many clients where they would say, okay, we want you to find the perfect match, but we only want females between this age group. Or we have a certain aesthetic that ties into our brand, so they must look a certain way.
Right.
Things like that. So yeah, I've definitely seen behind the curtain in some of these businesses where you go, A, I'm tenured enough now to know that I don't want to work with you, but B, now you're asking for these other things and you need to fix the foundations before you can move on to that. It's all going to come crashing down. You can't create this huge, really complex people strategy that you expect to be run by people that are essentially HR admins. We can do all this work for you, but it's going to collapse the minute I walk away. You need to put the right structure in place to support that work and help it evolve, as well as just do these three things.
Man, agency is such a great foundation. It's just learning by the fire hose. I definitely had those same requests for age and gender. I even remember a client that was religious based. Lessons. So many
games. Okay, but on the flip side then, what's some green flags? What makes you really excited to work with a company?
I'm thinking of a particular company that wanted the very first project. They wanted me to come in and do a very deep dive into their salaries and into their benefits. And it was so important to them, despite the fact that this is a nonprofit, that their employees, literally be able to live in Seattle, which is a very, very expensive city to live in. And they wanted me to increase benefits. They wanted me to put in a 4K. They wanted me to make sure their employees were safe now, could live the life. It's not like I was paying them all that much, but bringing them to standard and then also ensuring their future. And that company is very transparent with these conversations, which was, very a whole refreshing world to me. That was not something that we normally talk about. And I think that that's really changing within the HR space. I still don't personally feel comfortable talking about how much I make with other people, but maybe that norm will change. But I just love that the very first thing they wanted me to do was to improve their employees' lives, and they were going to figure it out in their budget.
Why is it always the non-profits that are the nice guys? Why can't these big corporate giants be nice as well? I mean, I think I answered my question there, but
the companies that can actually afford to do it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I loved that project. And every time I talk with that executive director, there's something else that she wants me to do for her employees. And that just warms my heart because they're doing great work.
Yeah, that is awesome. All right. Unfortunately, we've only got time for one more question because really trying to keep these conversations tight at 30 minutes. Research has shown us that people like to listen to them on the way to work or in a lunch break. So finally, to bring us to a close, what advice would you have for a HR leader who perhaps is considering stepping away from the full-time grind and looking for something more flexible and purpose-driven? What have you learned from your experience that you can share?
Would say do it, and maybe even be able to start doing it before you leave that large company or whatever corporate job you're in. You can start doing the framework on weekends. There are so many parts of building this business that were a surprise to me. I mean, I knew, okay, I need a website. I need what is my business, which was harder to define than I actually expected, because we are the business. So kind of selling ourselves. But you can set all the social media, the business licenses, set all of that up, kind of get a foundation while you still have that paycheck coming in. That, I think it was a huge plus for me. And, it's a risk, but it's also a massive reward.
And would you give advice that people should set up on their own or perhaps start working through a consultancy such as yours, for example, not necessarily freelancing, but finding other people and kind of joining together as opposed to trying to stand alone?
Goodness. I know just kind of the world that we're in at the moment, it's a little tough. So I do collaborate quite a bit, but I don't work for those companies. We bill separately. So get networking, talk to people who do what you want to do. I mean, that's the same advice I give to a lot of candidates who want to switch companies or switch, titles and those sorts of things. Talk to people, network. There are so many networks out there for solopreneurs, for women, for moms, for, X this company, or, get on LinkedIn, come talk to us, come connect. I think.
Yeah. I very strongly agree. I think from my own personal experience, because I never set out to create my own business, I ended up, and Sarah knows this already, but I ended up doing it for tax purposes, which is about the worst reason I can think of. But I was already doing a number of kind of consulting projects, and somebody came to me and said, hey, you do realize you have to pay tax on these things? And I'm thinking, yeah, but I'll figure it out when I get there. And it was somebody else that said, you're going to be far better off if you create an LLC. First of all, you realize there's a lot of write-offs and things that you can do that you're not currently taking advantage of. And secondly, it's going to bite you in the bum if you don't figure this stuff out. So having somebody that just gave me the insight that I didn't even know about. It never occurred to me to even ask these questions because I didn't know anything about all of that side of stuff. So definitely utilize your networks to figure out before it's too late what you don't know, because you can't ask the questions until you know what you need to know. And oftentimes those things come up just in pure conversation without you driving towards it. I know for me and Sarah, like we've shared our journeys quite a lot, and I'll come to Sarah and I'll be like, hey, you wrote a book. Like, did you have any networks or did you find any tools that were really good with this? And she wasn't able to give me that, but she was able to say, but this was what I did. And these ideas were things that hadn't even occurred to me, were not in my sphere whatsoever. And that's how I think anybody can prepare for going solo and taking on this very difficult, but also incredibly rewarding path. I don't think I don't want to talk myself out of future jobs, but I can't imagine going into a full-time employment situation right now, but who knows what the future holds.
Exactly. Oh, very good.
Well, Awesome, Sarah. Thank you so much. I mean, I know we've discussed, I want to go into so much more detail on other areas, and we'll probably look to have you come back and talk to us again on other topics, but really appreciate you being here to share about the fractional work and give us some insights into what you do, how you do it, why, and all of that stuff.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye. Okay.